the warmth, the encouragement that our dear friend Allan Kardec has proposed to us long ago. With your guidance, protection, and permission, we start this meeting. So I would like to take the time to share with you a little bit about our dear friend Flavio Zanetti. Before we go on, and as usual, I like to bring a way for us to connect with our friend, right? Flavio Zanetti is just like one of us in terms of an incarnated being, a husband, a father of two beautiful young ladies, growing fast, as we usually like to say, and is someone who has his own struggles, own difficulties, works and dedicate his life in many ways, right? And one of the ways is right here with us today, to stop and work and learn and really dive into a topic to bring to us is an amazing way to share his moment, right? His time as well. So we are very thankful, first and foremost, Flavio, for the opportunity to be here with us today. On the flip side, on the more let's say eloquent way, Flavio Zanetti has always been amazed by the degree of rational comprehension and comforting Spiritism brings to humanity. He is an avid Spiritist student and a dedicated volunteer for the Spiritist movement in the United States and abroad. Since 1999, he has worked in different positions for the Allan Kardec Spiritist Society of Massachusetts, i.e., board member, treasurer, lecturer, educator, and studies coordinator, and etc. He lives in Boston, United States, with his wife and their two beautiful 10-year-old twin daughters. And as we have said earlier, Flavio is this dedicated person, connecting with in many areas and in Spiritism as well. And today he will talk about Kardec's life and the legacy as well, right? It's always good to bring the basics, right, Flavio, to remind us what this man is for us in terms of the dedication, the work that he brought to us, and is still with us as well. So, once more, thank you for being with us. I'm not going to take much of your time, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thanks, Leo, for the warm welcome and the introduction. It's with my heart filled with gratitude that I'm here once again, spending a few minutes of our precious time together. And this week, more special than ever, where we have an opportunity to study a little bit about the life of this very interesting man that we know as Allan Kardec. So before we start, we'd like to ask everyone to keep our thoughts raised to our, benefactor spirits, to our guardian angels. May they continue to inspire us, to bring peace to our hearts, to bring wisdom to our minds, so that we can really comprehend the message, the teachings that Jesus has left us with the same dedication, with the same commitment with which we put together in order to prepare for you folks. Right? So let's get started. So Allan Kardec, life and legacy. Who is Allan Kardec? Who was this man that we know today as Allan Kardec? What was his life like? What is the legacy that he left us with? What kind of name is Allan Kardec? We know that's a pen name. Why did he choose a specific pen name in order to really write Spiritism, or the whole works, or the basic works, I should say, of Spiritism? So our goal here, folks, for the next 40 or so minutes is to spend some time going over his life, his accomplishments, right, his background, really, in order to really form what we know today, Spiritism, what was like in those days, back in the 19th century in France. Let's roll with it, right? Buckle up, enjoy the journey, and we'll go together on it. So exactly 218 years ago, okay, more clearly on, or more specifically on October 3rd, 1804 at 7 p.m. That's why we're here, because the beginning of October, we usually talk about Kardec, so we can get a little more knowledge on the life of this very interesting and singular person that has contributed so much to humanity. So on October 3rd, 1804, Allan Kardec, or I should say somebody in the city of Lyon in France, which is on the southeastern part of the country, close to Switzerland and Italy. Back in those days, Lyon was a very small town, not as prominent, not as large as it is today, away from what Paris used to be back in the days. And if you go back even more so in time, we have to remember that Paris was the center of the universe back then. That's how we, humans categorized, right? Paris was really the center of everything. The Enlightenment period, or all the arts, the sciences, everything was being done in Paris back then. At that time, the lingua franca of the world was not English like it is today. It used to be French. So everything, all things converted into Paris. And Allan Kardec was born in Lyon, very close to Paris. This man, which has a baptism name of Hippolyte Léon Denisard Rivail, was born in that small city of Lyon. And then, if you look into his family, he comes from a traditional Catholic family. Okay? His parents were very Catholic, traditional. His parents were nobles. They were very well off. But Kardec himself, growing up, did not consider himself a religious man, because he was not in accordance, or he didn't really believe in a lot of the teachings that he found both in Catholicism and Protestantism, right, back in the days. So even though he came from a religious family, he was not himself a very religious person per se. Then we look at his education. All right, let's maybe fast forward to at the age of 12. He had concluded his studies in Lyon. Let me just ask you, folks, what were we doing when we were 12 years old? I'm not sure about you, but I was away from concluding or finishing all my educational studies, or the equivalent to high school studies today, right? But Kardec at the age of 12, he had already finished that. So imagine, right? A prodigy student, obviously somebody that really took, right, good passion and love for education, so much so that his parents decided to send him to Switzerland to study with Henri Pestalozzi, which was the Swiss man, very, very important educator from the 19th century. He trained other educators. Henri Pestalozzi trained other educators like Joseph Neath, who introduced Pestalozzianism to the United States later on, and Friedrich Frebel, if I can pronounce his name correctly, who really was the founder of kindergarten. So if you went to kindergarten, if your kids are now or have gone to kindergarten, we owe to Pestalozzi. So Pestalozzi was a very prominent educator with a lot of great pedagogy back in the days, so much so that he founded the very first holistic school of the world in the world. A school where not only instruction was given, but also a way that students use their hearts, their minds, and their hands in order to really learn lessons. So Pestalozzi goes there, and then after 2 years only, at age 14, he was already teaching his fellow students. Let's ask the question again. What were we doing when we were 14 years old? Right? Not sure about you guys, but I don't believe I was teaching my fellow students. Anyways, obviously, he knew a lot about diverse subjects, including theology, astronomy, philosophy. He spoke 8 languages by the time he was 14. And look at us, sometimes even have difficulties learning English. He already knew 8 languages by the time he was 14 years old. And he was even teaching basic concepts of medicine. So this is Kardec at the age of 14. Okay? Then he comes back to France. He came back with all that baggage, full of knowledge, full of expertise, full with unforgettable lessons from a great educator, Henri Pestalozzi, whose moral influence would never fail to inspire Kardec, or Hippolyte, I should say, from that moment onwards. So much so that with all that vast experience, Professor Rival does what? He came to be known really as a writer, an author, and an educator himself too. He was motivated by such great work that Pestalozzi did, right, back in those days. So, some of his works can be seen here. For example, he founded a school along the lines of the Yverdon Institute, where Henri Pestalozzi used to be the dean. He called that a technical educational institute in 1825. And for the next 5 years, he publishes several other books with wide acceptance in France and beyond, because those books were also translated in other languages on math, languages, physics, physiology, and astronomy. My friends, without a doubt, Hippolyte, or later on Allan Kardec, was a very well-educated man or person, came from a very well-off family with a lot of conditions to proportionate or to really offer him a great education. And by the way, if you are a parent watching this live or maybe later on, our utmost important thing that we have to do is to take care of our kids' education, right? Let's remember a couple of things. School's job is to instruct. The parent's job is to educate our children, all right? So this is Allan Kardec, Hippolyte, right? If I look at continuing his life, what happens after that? At this institute, he actually found the love of his life. So he ends up really meeting Amélie Gabrielle Boudet, which really becomes his wife later on. So when he was 28 years of age, he married Amélie Boudet, a distinguished teacher, a very cultured young woman, poet, and a painter whom he had met at the Institute. Notice here that when he married Amélie Boudet, he was 28 years old and she was 37. So imagine 200 plus years ago, somebody, right? A man marrying a woman that was way older. That was considered to be a big taboo back in the days. But Allan Kardec didn't really care. He loved Amélie, Amélie loved him, and they got married. If I could add something, or if he could add something along those lines of what Emmanuel, the spirit author, tells us or talks to us about in a book called Twin Souls, he explains to us, or the author explains to us, that it's only through these marriages where folks are really destined or really planning to bring humanity a lot of progress, is where we encounter these, what we call twin souls. They have previously committed to being together towards the greater good, so to speak. This was definitely the case with Amélie and Hippolyte. This was definitely the case with Gandhi, if you remember, and his wife, when Gandhi decided to say, you know what, I need to really work to broadcast Hinduism throughout India. His wife was on his side, working with him alongside with him. So when we look at these situations, we can definitely explicate what Emmanuel talks to us about to win souls, right? It's really for these very specific marriages where we have these individuals together in a true partnership, destined or really targeted to bring a better condition or a better place, or bring humanity or the world to a better place, which happened with Allan Kardec. Then we fast forward a couple of years, and then at the age of 50, he's a well respected professor and a recognized writer and author. Okay? 50 years old, right? He's accomplished, he's doing well. Then he's invited, or starts to pay attention to a phenomenon that was really catching everybody by surprise, which was called the turning tables. So people from all cultural and socioeconomic levels or statuses, from different religions, different parts of the world, even in the White House, they've had some of these seances or spiritualist phenomena where tables used to turn and knock and all those things. So they would participate in these sessions that we later on understand now, thanks to Kardec's works, really a session of physical effects, right? Or phenomena or physical effects took place. But the most curious thing about this is that in these exhibitions, these tables moved, they jumped, and they swiveled, and they turned, and they did a lot of these things. They answered, for example, some questions by codes. Some of the very first ones, they tried to decipher were codes around one knock, letter A, two knocks, letter B, 26 knocks, letter Z, and so forth. Then they were able to really form phrases, albeit taking a long time to form these phrases. But these tables were able to construct phrases. And then not only that, but answer questions from participants. So how is that a table is answering questions from participants? Although a lot of times these exhibitions or these events, people made fun of it, right? Communications were obtained, which oftentimes demonstrated a very intelligent basis. And that, my friends, really intrigued Hippolyte. Really said, you know what? What's going on? There's got to be something more to this that I'm not aware. What is it behind this? What are some of the things that are happening here that I see in those tables that... So when he was invited, and by the way, he was invited once, okay? And then he said, I'm not going, this doesn't make any sense. I don't want to go. He was invited twice, okay? And then Mr. Fortier, which was a friend of Kardec from the days, said, let's go, let's go there. Then he accepted. And then, interestingly enough, they will go to the house of a madame called Plaine-Maison. There was a house where this, family used to sponsor or used to offer these events. And then he witnessed tables turning, jumping, and he was really, really intrigued. He was appalled. He was dumbfounded to see these tables answering questions from people that were there present, asking them. He came to really unmask all that, craziness that people were talking about in France, in the United States, in the UK, and so forth. But when he got there, something else happened. Not only was he hooked on it, they say, you know what? I have to find out what's going on here. I have to understand what's happening with these tables. And he tried, and he tried, and he tried. And the more he tried, the more he was convinced that those conditions left no room for any doubt. He thought maybe through magnetism. He was a student of magnetism, that science that talks about, the magnets attracting themselves. He thought maybe they're putting some magnets, they're making those tables swivel. No. He inspected those tables down, up, left, and right, and he found nothing that could really make those tables move. Even more so, that he found nothing that could help those tables answer questions. And then he comes up with an interesting state of describing what was going on with those tables, right? And then he argued, change my slide here, he argued that those tables were actually intelligent beings because they were answering intelligent questions. Then he made that statement: an intelligent effect must have an intelligence force as its cause. There's no other way. This is not just a piece of wood or a piece of metal that's answering here. There's something behind. And then, deeply interested and with a solid scientific and philosophical basis, he goes to change the course of the experiments. Notice, thanks to his background, he was a cultured man. He spoke several languages. He saw the table answering questions in a language that nobody there spoke. He saw the table as answering questions from an area or from a subject that nobody there knew anything about it. Imagine if I go and ask a question around medicine and there are no doctors in the room, and then something answers that question. He goes, that something must know medicine. That something must know those languages that nobody else here does. But what's that something? What's behind all of those things? That's what Kardec was deeply interested, deeply interested. And the more he thought about it, the more he was participating, he changed overall how those meetings took place in a way that he used meanings for tables, not to make fun or not to drive, not to drive fun to the audience, but instead to answer poignant questions about the times, about situations where only, for example, he knew anything about it or somebody knew anything about it and nobody else did. Try to really catch those tables in a way that, yeah, see, that's false. That's false. That's fake news, as we'll tell it, in our common language today. But in reality, he was not. So he was deeply interested. And then as he changed that, he got even more involved in those apparent futilities, as he said. He thought that was just maybe a hobby that people had from those phenomena, but it was something a lot more serious, like the revelation of something new, like something that's really being revealed, not only to Kardec, but to Paris back then. A new law, which he took upon himself to investigate even further, even deeper. And that's exactly what he did. So he got more involved. He brought some rigorous studies from his background in order to really demystify what was happening. But on the other hand, he got even more interested on it. So much so that in one night, he was having that ceremony one night. Somebody called Zephyrus, or a spirit guide called Zephyrus, appeared. And that spirit declared that he was actually a protector spirit, or Allan Kardec's protector spirit. And he had known Allan Kardec in a past existence, in a time of the Druids in Gaul. Gaul, for example, my friends, is the western part of western part of Europe during the Iron Age that was occupied, like today, I think it's a mix between France, Belgium, and some surrounding countries. That's what we know used to be called Gaul or Gallia, right, in the local language. And then Zephyrus revealed to Reveal that his former name was of a Celtic druid named Allan Kardec. He was way more intrigued than that. Then he started to really pay attention to some of those things. He wanted to read more about the druids, right? For example, this is a ceremony at Stonehenge of the idea that we know today, based on the information that we have, the Druids, like a religious ceremony. So Allan Kardec had lived in a previous life as a Druid um, religious individual. Something that we learned through Spiritism, my friends. Not sure if this is your first time watching a Spiritist, talk, or really getting access to or getting in contact with Spiritism. We believe in the concept of reincarnation, which is the idea that this is not my only life. I have lived before, I'm living now, and I'll live additional lives down the road. I'm not a physical being with a spirit. It's on the reverse of that. I'm a spiritual being with a physical body. And this incarnation of mine is the one that I have that can really help me get to the next level, that can really help me really progress in the way that I have to progress. So Allan Kardec, possessing that information, right, with that information that he was reviled, having that information that he was Allan Kardec, he decides, you know what? If I use my name, Hippolyte Léon Denis Rivail, I'm a well-known scientist, educator, writer, author, not only in France, but in the surrounding countries. Whatever I do here, people are going to automatically associate whatever I publish with my previous life or with my life that I have had so far. So he then decides, you know what? I gotta use a pen name of Allan Kardec. And that's exactly is the invitation of Zephyr or Zephyrus, depending on the translation, reveals to Rivail that his mission was to really be the compiler or the encoder of Spiritism. That's why we don't say that Spiritism is from Kardec. Kardec only, I should say only with quotes, obviously, Kardec only compiled those messages that he saw later on from different spirits. And if we go, for example, to the gospel according to Spiritism, the Spirit of Truth, which is the one that summoned Kardec to do this work, to carry out these works, right? The Spirit of Truth, as we see often in many, many texts from the Spirit's book and beyond, including the gospel according to Spiritism, the Spirit of Truth will say that there's something called the universal control of spiritual teachings, which in a way serves as the council where all these teachings, they have to match. And then talks to Kardec, instructs Rivail at the time to pay attention to the logic and reason of those messages. He could do that because of his background. See, he was prepared. His background prepared him to be able to carry out these activities. Then the unanimous opinion of the majority of spirits. Kardec received thousands of messages, letters from all over the world, pretty much, including the United States, right? As we have records, in a way that those messages he had to corroborate with other mediums that were writing those messages. And then, in agreement that, yeah, this message makes sense because so and so somewhere else who doesn't know this individual said the same thing. Therefore, this corroborates or is part of the universal control of the spirit's teachings. And then he was really able to publish those in the works that he carries out. So, if we look into what Kardec did in a way of really building the way of really paving the way for us to today know what Spiritism is, was a very, very laborious activity to compile, to compare, to contrast all these messages in order to publish, right? Not to get the books published. So if you look, for example, the concept of psychography or automatic writing, the development of these spiritist ideals basically began in the Boudin's family residence back in 1855, because Kardec used to go there because they had two daughters, Caroline and Julie. They were aged 14 and 16 approximately, and they were writing a lot of these messages. Then Kardec used those two little girls, adolescents, as mediums, right? That we really started getting these messages across. The interesting thing is that in the beginning, they used a bread basket, a same as a table, for example. Instead of the table itself turning, the bread basket will turn and will point to specific letters. And those letters were actually telling Kardec the answers for the questions he had asked beforehand. So then eventually they got replaced by a pen or a pencil, and then messages started to really flourish. And this new body of knowledge was drawn there and prepared Kardec to really publish the very first book called the Spirit's Book. This, my friends, is how everything started, right? So the Spirit's Book was born from consultations made with the spirits, thus the name Spirit's Book. That's not called Kardec's books. That's not, no, it's the Spirit's Book because it's the teachings from the spirits, released first edition on April 18th, 1857, opening up the whole world to a horizon of possibilities in the field of spiritual knowledge. That's when everything started. And then, if you look at this interesting picture here, on the number 8 of the Rue du Martyr in Paris, is when Allan Kardec founded the very first Society for Spiritist Studies on April 1st, 1858, almost about a year or so after the publication of the Spirit's Book. This is where everything started, my friends, in this little house. This is a picture that was taken recently or maybe a few years ago of that little, small, humble house where everything started, right? So let's take a look at Kardec's main works, because the life and the legacy of this unique man published 12 books plus the Spiritist magazine, which was being printed consecutively during 11 years between 1858 and 1869. But the basic works of Allan Kardec obviously starts right on the top left of the Spirit's Book, which is this compendium of Q&A, or the basics of Spiritism, that has all the questions and answers that we can ever realize or come up with. It talks about all the life in the spiritual world. It talks about moral laws. It talks about a lot of the things that today are common questions. Where do we come from? Where are we going? What happens when we die? All those things are there in the Spirit's Book. So I highly recommend, if you haven't had a chance to read that, absolutely, it's a great book to be read, but also to be studied, right? So again, the book talks about life in the spiritual world, talks about God, talks about the formation of planets, living beings, right? And so forth. Talks about the relationship between the spiritual world and material world, talks about moral lives, really becomes this compendium, right, that we have today. And then at the end, at the very last a part of the book, it talks about hopes and consolations, which really gives us an idea of a future ahead. That's where everything started, my friends. Then he publishes consecutively the Spiritist magazine. This is the newer translation cover, right, that I'm showing here. In 1859, he published a very nice book called What is Spiritism? And in that very book, he describes how do we tell, or how can we categorize a Spiritist person. He says, and I quote, we can see, or we can recognize the Spiritist individual by his or her moral transformation, by the efforts somebody puts in order to really control our bad tendencies and inclinations. That's what he categorizes a Spiritist. That means I don't have to be called a Spiritist to be a Spiritist. I don't have to go to the Spiritist Center 5 days a week. Of course, if I go, it's quicker, it's easy because I learn. I don't have to. That's the interesting caveat here in this very simple book, he talks about what is Spiritism. The interesting thing about this small book, I should say, is that even today, there's still a lot of prejudice, right, with amongst religions and so forth. I'd like to invite you to go back, 100, almost 200 years ago, to understand how much prejudice was there back then against Spiritism. So he wrote this book to really remove all the blur that was still out there in relation to Spiritism. Then he writes the book, or the medium's book rather, in 1861. By the way, Kardec himself created the word mediumship. The word did not exist before he created that word. So mediumship was a word that Allan Kardec created. Reincarnation existed before, obviously, right? You have Hindus believing in reincarnation. A lot of traditions and all that, they believe in reincarnation, but the word mediumship, Allan Kardec was the one who really crafted it for the very, very first time. Then he published Spiritism in its simplest expression, which is an amazing small book that talks about you could be a Catholic and a Spiritist. You could be a Muslim and a Spiritist. You could be an atheist and a Spiritist. It's okay. Because to be a Spiritist, it's to be someone that you care about your modification, your inner transformation every day. Every day you look at yourself, you look backwards. I mean, I don't want to be this person anymore. I want to be better today. I want to really be a better husband, a better wife, a better son, a better father, a better mother, a better employee, a better employer, and so forth. That book talks to us in the simplest expression what Spiritism really is. Then 2 years after, he publishes the Gospel According to Spiritism, which is really a compendium that talks about all the most important Christian teachings from the Bible in a way that we can interpret them with the eyes and the lens from back in the days. Because a lot, I'm sure you guys can agree with that, a lot has changed through the translations, through the language, from when the 4 Gospels, right, were published. That we talked about Jesus' life back then, from what we see and understand today. Then he publishes a year after, Heaven and Hell. And by the way, here's the catch. If you like soap operas, this is the very best book for you because it has a lot of stories of individuals that passed away. Kings and servants and a lot of folks from different shapes and ways of life that they wake up in the spiritual realm and they really tell us what happened after they woke up, their transition, the moment of their quote-unquote death. As we know, death doesn't exist, as we learned through Spiritism. And then, in 1868, he published the Genesis, really to talk about miracles and premonitions according to Spiritism, really bringing the scientific view, the rational, the logical view of science towards what we learned from the Genesis, creation of the world, what happens when Earth was not really Earth and all that. Talks to us a lot about the way we see life, the way we see the world. Talks to us about the future, right? Planets, all those things. Really trying to corroborate a lot of the scientific components and the logic and the rationale towards what we learn from Spiritism. So when we look at this, right, it's really important for us to look at the logical paradigm that Spiritism brings. Because Spiritism, my friends, is based on facts. Facts that we learn from mediumship books, facts that we learn and see in the world in front of us, right? Facts that, according to the reasoning and the rigorous logic, give Spiritism a characteristic of a positivism that suits our time. They really tell us that tomorrow will be a better place. There will be better tomorrow. That we're all progressing to become better beings tomorrow. Gives us, right, the certainty, the comfort or counseling that we all need in order to overcome, in order to really surpass all the difficulties that we have in our lives. Explain to us, right? Really explain to us in logical and rational terms that Pain is the product of our own mistakes in the past. And progress depends on the efforts that we made beforehand, the efforts that we're making right now in order to become a better person. And then pain is also an instrument for the supreme justice to take place. So we should look at pain in a different way. Does that mean that pain will go away? No. That means that we'll look at pain in a very different way. No, somebody asked the question, Kardec was not a medium. No, he was not, as we know. He worked with a lot of mediums, and talking to those mediums, receiving the letters, he was able to decipher and compare them in order to publish them, right? So, a couple of questions I see here, I'm just going to tackle them as we go, right? If you look at what were the most difficult challenges in really disseminating or broadcasting Spiritism that Kardec suffered or encountered, and how he managed them, and do the same challenges still exist in some way today. So there were a lot of challenges. That's why he wrote the book, right? As I mentioned, what is Spiritism? And also Spiritism in its simplest expression, in a way to answer a lot of the critics that were completely against Spiritism, right? So there was a very famous act of faith of Barcelona where they intercepted a shipment of Spiritist books, and then they burned them back in the days. And then the burning of those books actually really helped solidify Spiritism in Spain as a country back then. So he encountered a lot of difficulties, a lot of roadblocks, a lot of doors were closed. He had to close his school. He suffered financial difficulties. He had to ask for help. A lot of these things happened to Kardec himself, right? If you read his biography, or if you want to watch a movie on Netflix, if you remember my first slides, I had a little picture of his movie on Netflix. Go home, watch his movie on Netflix. Talks, of course, in allegorical way, but talks about his life, his accomplishments, his challenges, and all that. But some of the things that he always relied upon was Amélie. Amélie played a huge role in supporting him, in working together with him, in really helping him as much as she could in order to really go forward with this, right? But then, one thing that I think it's very important to say or to mention is that Kardec did not act alone. He had other folks around him that gave him the support, that gave him really the partnership that he had in order to really make this happen, right? So he was not alone. But yeah, he faced a lot of difficulties. He faced a lot of roadblocks, a lot of prejudice, a lot of doors were closed, right? On his face. Absolutely. That is 100% correct. So if we go back to the idea of pain as this vehicle sometimes, what we learn through Spiritism is that we are the drivers of our lives. Before, if we really take into consideration different traditions, which, by the way, we totally respect and admire, because every religion brings somebody to a better place, right? As we like to believe. But as we learn through Spiritism, is that we are on the driver's seat and nobody else is. We may have the influence, we may receive the thoughts or the ideas, but at the end of the day, we are the ones driving our cars, so to speak, right? And then if you understand that, everything that happens to us, it's because of us, because we created. When you look at that, that changes our perspective into the life that we have, the difficulties and all that. That's why it's important to mention Kardec's greatest mission to really publish Spiritism was he was only able to be or to do so because of his reputation as a man of integrity, honesty, ethics, and culture. They really formed a main obstacle, with certain frivolous affirmations of the detractors of Spiritism come up against. They could attack Spiritism, but they could not attack the person, Allan Kardec, who was behind it, because he was a very ethical, honest, man behind all those. So look at this, folks. It's really important that we pay close attention to the life and legacy that this man gave us, right? Or this man left us with. Because as we learn through Spiritism, right, really removes all the blur from our eyes. It widens our horizons. We see the world with a different set of views now. A world that's, yes, we're moving the right direction. This, despite being all the tragic news on television, the world's becoming a better place. There hasn't been so much people volunteering towards helping others. There hasn't been ever so much assistance towards others than it is today, than we have today. And Allan Kardec proved that because he worked all the way up to his last day of his physical life, building what we know today as Spiritism. On March 31st, 1869, he was answering a doorbell. Somebody was there to get or to buy an issue of the Spiritist magazine, and he was the victim of a brain aneurysm, and he ended up passing away right there, working or really broadcasting the idea of Spiritism ahead. So when we look at that, right, this is the life of this illustrious man that left us with this beautiful body of knowledge that we call Spiritism. This amazing set of knowledge, amazing set of teachings, of experiences, of content that can really be used to transform our lives, and more so important, to help us offer some comforting for those who are in need. That's exactly what Allan Kardec said, that without charity, there's no salvation. These are his words, by the way. Because when he was asked, right, what he could have said, imagine if he said, without Spiritism, there's no salvation. There's only maybe 30 million Spiritists all over the world today, give or take, maybe more, maybe less. He didn't say without the church, not the temple, nothing like that. He said without charity. That's why when we raise up, right, we should always have charity as our mindset, as our motivation for our own lives. Because the more we extend our hands to help those who are in need, the more we reach out to those that need some help. In the same way that, as an amazing example, that somebody had the Spirit's book, and then that person benefited so much from the Spirit's book that that person left the Spirit's book in one of the main bridges in Paris, and then somebody else was walking that bridge because he was going to commit suicide. That person picked up the book, and there was a written on the first page, "This book saved my life. Maybe it will save yours too." That person read that, started reading the book, and decided not to commit suicide. That person went in to meet Allan Kardec afterwards, because there was an address on the book, the publishing of the Parisian Spiritist Societies. And he goes there. My friends, there's so much that we can use Spiritism to help console, bring some comforting for those folks that are going through difficult times. The idea that we'll never lose anyone. Yeah, it's going to be tough when somebody passes. Yes, it's a difficult time for all of us. Yes, we will grieve, but we will meet those individuals again. We will meet those people again. They'll meet us. They might be even seeing us right now for what we matter, what we care. So these types of knowledge that we gain from Spiritism really helps us soothe our hearts, helps us give a North Star in a way that we don't lose hope. We're always connected with what we learned back in the days from when Christ was here with us. Unfortunately, his message of love and care was changed throughout the years, throughout some translations and whatnot. But as we learn, right, Spiritism is giving us opening, broadening our horizons, as I said before, for us to understand that in a different, more comprehensive, and more holistic way. So I truly hope that these few minutes were a good use of your time. might be an inspiration for you to go back and watch the movies on Netflix, or maybe read more of Kardec's works, or get more knowledge about this amazing individual that really dedicated his entire life towards the build up of what we know today as Spiritism. I think there's a couple of Q&A questions here, Leo. I can tackle them if you like me to, or however.
We'll take care of that for you.
Even better.
Well, not answering the question, but at least posting them for you.
Come on.
Take a sip of water. I know you're on the go there. If we don't stop you, just keep going, which it would be okay too. But obviously we have time. But first of all, Flavio, would like to thank you for again having you here, discussing this amazing topic with us. Not in terms only of the person Allan Kardec revile, right? But the works that comes from Kardec, which is this amazing knowledge, body of knowledge that comes, that Kardec put together for us, right? With the spirits, with the group of people who dedicate their lives from the beginning, right? Mr. Fortier actually inviting him for a couple of times before he decided to give in and say, okay, I'm going to go to these meetings, right? So thank you for this, because it is with these reminders. Sometimes it can be overwhelming that we see this, the celebration of Kardec every year and whatnot. But it is with these reminders that we also stay courageous in our task as well of changing ourselves, right? Hopefully, the consequences of changing others and changing our environment will happen, but it's definitely a matter of changing our lives, right? Our moral. So on that note, thank you for that. I'll ask Daniel to post the questions here so we can read together and we can work on them together. And then Kirsten asking, I'm curious, at a Kardec's time, 28 and 30s was considered old at that time. I wonder if that is indicative of their own evolution, or is it more to do with the fact that they were twin souls? I think she's referring to the marriage.
Yeah. So yes. So 30s back in the days, back at that time, used to be considered very old. So Kardec, let's recap, right? Kardec got in touch with Spiritism when he was 50 years old. So if you are on the verge of studying Spiritism, right, there's always a chance. There's always time for it. Don't ever lose hope, right? You can start at any age. Doesn't really matter. If Kardec himself started at 50, which is probably at 70s now, right, we can start at any time. So the invitation is still out there for all of us, right, to get more knowledge. The fact that they were really a marriage where both partners came to build something for the greater good is what Emmanuel, the spirit guide, talks to us about being twin souls. The vast number of marriages that we have today are not made of twin souls. I'm sorry to disappoint you, but not, right? So unless you are here with somebody else to build great things for humanity, right? We're all stumbling across each other and really working with each other in a way that we're progressing and helping each other out, right? That's what we learn. But the concept that Emmanuel puts together as twin souls are only for those relationships that are really not destined, but they're really targeted to really build something greater for humanity. There are many examples of that. Allan Kardec and Gandhi were just two that it's right, in front of us, right? More recent. Hope that helps, Kristen.
So it's good to know that the 70s is the new 50s then.
I guess. Or I'm hoping.
Right, we hope so. Well, you continue by asking, Flavio, could you repeat what book of Emmanuel's that discussed twin souls?
Yeah, I think the book's name is called Twin Souls. It's the same name. I don't know the availability of that book, but it's a very old book that was written in the 50s, 1950s, and it has that same title, Twin Souls.
Perfect. Thank you. We'll go then to the next question. Kirsten is on the row here. Wait, is Kardec's little house still in existence? Is it a museum or a regular place that someone now owns?
So I believe the place that he used to live was demolished, so they changed that. The place where the Spiritist Society of Paris was founded It's still there today, but it's a house, somebody lives there. But it's still there. There's a picture I showed you. The picture's 4 or 5 years old. If you look at the picture, there was even a sushi place next door to it.
I
So
noticed
that's actually
the thing. Yeah.
recent.
Eat sushi. I saw that. I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah,
Globalization,
that's very
right?
recent.
Why not?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, so that's awesome. No, thank you for that. And it's nice to also connect with the physical, right? Because it kind of, goes takes us back to the place, and I'm quite sure there are, a lot of still the energy around those locations. It's definitely a place that I would like to visit as well.
Yeah,
But
it's
more
worthwhile
so
visiting.
uh,
Absolutely.
more so to really connect with the environment and connect with the ideas of the time.
Mhm.
Yeah, definitely. Daniel,
Yeah.
do we have any more? Yep. All right. Many people in Spiritism knows about Kardec's 5 books, the Codification. Do you have any comment about his other publications? I believe this is referring to some of the books that he published as the Dennis Art Revival. Yes. And I'm glad that Daniel asked this question here, because as you were speaking, I was looking for some of these books as well. But do you have, or do you know of any of the other books?
So I think the question is for Kardec's books beyond the codification, not Hippolyte's books, like the arithmetic and math and those. That was my understanding, right?
In general.
Yeah. So Allan Kardec published 12 books total, in addition to his Spiritist magazine, right? So he published, let me see if I can remember this by memory. The Spirit's Book, 1857. The Instruction and Practice of Spiritist Manifestations was 58. Then What is Spiritism, 59. The Medium's Book, 61. Then he republished the Spirit's Book with more Q&As, the final version, right? Then he published the Spiritism in its simplest expression, 62. The same year that he published the Spiritist Journey of 1862, that's been recently translated by the Spiritist Federation. We have a way to acquire that today. It's an amazing book that talks about Kardec's visits to other Spiritist centers in different parts of France and surrounding countries. He talked to the people there. Hey, what's your difficulties? Really getting this, momentum going and all that. Then in 64, he published Gospel According to Spiritism. Same year, he published the summary of the laws of Spiritist phenomena, if I'm not mistaken. Next year, 65, he published Heaven and Hell, hashtag the soap opera of Spiritism. Love that. 68, he published the Genesis, right? The miracles and premonitions according to Spiritism. Then in 68 also, he published the character of the Spiritist revelation. It's a very interesting book. It talks about the characteristics of the Spiritist revelation, how it took place, what are the fundamentals, how everything started and all that. His method of analyzing the letters, the messages, he talks to us in that book. It's an amazing little book. And then 69, the last year before he passed away, that the Spiritist, the magazine also stopped being published a national catalog of Spiritist works that included not only his works, but also works from other authors that were around, right? For example, Arthur Conan Doyle and all that. Some spiritualist works were there listed as well. And then in 1890, there was the posthumous works. There was not Kardec who published, but there are some things that he actually cataloged or really, brought those messages from the posthumous works. So that's like 12 books plus the magazine. Wow, that was
Amazing.
a lot.
It's a lot of work, right? And at times we complain that we have to read a book, right? Well, I don't. I mean, but some people are like, "Oh, this is too thick. This is a lot of work, or that is a lot of work." I mean, not only reading, but doing the different things as well. And here's this man, because one of the things that it was interesting that you also mentioned, Flavio, was the fact that he also had to live, right? He also had a personal life, in terms of, he had to work, he had to sustain himself and the family. We also know from his work of helping other people too, that he led a normal life. So it's not just, Spiritism, and here he was, doing all of this work to humanity in general. And
He also had to work and to make, earn the
living,
bread. Yeah, exactly, right?
right? right. So that that really gives us the emphasis that we can do it. If he could do it, we can do it too, right? And we can grow. Obviously, there was more to Kardec in terms of this idea that is quote unquote someone who incarnated for that mission, for that work, but also we have ours, and we can lead a righteous life as well. So, Daniel, we one more. Was
No,
Kardec a medium?
Kardec
You already,
was not a
yeah.
medium. Yeah, we already answered that on the spot. Yeah, he was not a medium. Hello, Yasko. Greetings to you as well, my love. Thank you, my dear. Thank you for asking the
Before
question.
that, before we read Yasko real quick here, in your studies, and this is something that it just I think it's helpful for all of us. Do you think of not being a medium, was it helpful or was it more difficult for him?
It's a good. Nobody has ever asked me that question. I would say not being a medium, I think, helped him because he was very rigorous. Rigorous, right? He was very ethical in his work, right? And really analyzing the messages and all that. So I think not being like a medium, extensive medium per se, has helped him um, um, do his work. That's my personal understanding, right? That's my personal understanding.
Yeah, I wanted to trick you there because I also agree with you. I shouldn't say trick you, but I agree with you in terms of being more critical to how he evaluated the whole thing, right? And he
Yeah.
was able to stay true to the what he learned with Pestalozzi as well. So that is true. I also believe that it was helpful in a way, to the greatest extent, really, not being a medium and not be biased as well to what he was actually giving passage to. Thank you. Thanks for the emphasis there.
No problem.
Yasko says, "Hi there, Flavio. Would you give us some highlights of the dynamics of the activities in the Parisian Society of Spiritist Study and its impact in the codification of Spiritist book? Thanks."
So a lot of that Yasko is on the Spiritist magazine. A lot of those dynamics are described in the Spiritist magazine. They spent a lot of time studying those messages, responding to folks. They were writing letters to them, asking for help, helping other folks setting up Spiritist centers, not only in France but throughout other parts of Europe as well. They did a lot so to help others in a way to not only gain knowledge of Spiritism, how to practice Spiritism, how to found Spiritist institutions, and also how to analyze some of the messages that were given or sent over to them. Those are the main activities, so to speak, that the Parisian Spiritist Society took place back in those days. Then, obviously, after Kardec's passing, there was a lot of changes, and right. But when he was there, it was those are the main activities, so to speak, that we have records from the Spiritist magazine.
As we wait for the next question here, Paula Smith then asks, "Do we know anything about Kardec as a spirit? As about Kardec as a spirit?" Hmm.
I My understanding is, are you looking to know, for example, Kardec's previous lives, previous
Or I
incarnations?
believe she's asking more the after death. So to complement, do you know if Kardec has sent any communication after his death as
Oh,
atonement?
yeah, I don't believe so. Not to my knowledge. Obviously, before he was Allan Kardec, there were some incarnations that we have records of, right? So, for example, Jan Hus was a great priest. I'm sorry, a pastor, right? That lived in the 14th century in the Czech Republic. Back used to be Czechoslovakia, right? He was a great proponent of the Protestant ideas. There's a message. I forgot what I read this, which book I read this, but that really showcases the encounter between Kardec and Martin Luther in the spiritual realm. Again, there's some of these that we have access to, but not anything more in more details. Like right now, where's Allan Kardec right now? we don't have any details on that.
Very well put. Thank you. Then that's everything. Well, Flavio, once more, I would like to thank you. If we have any more questions, we'll pass it along to you to answer, and we can pass it along to others. But I would like to go ahead and invite you for your final comments here, so we can go ahead and pass it on to our next part of our meeting tonight.
All right. So, folks, as we reflect upon Allan Kardec's life, the very unique life of this human being that dedicated almost his entire life to help others, to bring knowledge, to bring teachings, to really open people's minds to see a new world out there. He has left so much for us in terms of knowledge, of wisdom, of information, of content. There's so much in front of us that we can really embrace ourselves and read his works and read spiritist books and materials and publications. Because as we understand, as we look at Spiritism, right, it's really one of the best tools that we have that can really get us towards the next level, that can really get us towards the next stops of our lives. There's so much that we have to learn. Of course, it's impossible to do a thorough biography in 45 minutes of this illustrious man that was Allan Kardec. So may I invite you to watch the movie, to read more of his books, to get more information. The Spirits Magazine is this amazing compendium of knowledge. May this just be a small token of inspiration for you to continue your studies, to continue your development of learning, of developing yourself towards becoming a better person. Let us remember that all of that is in vain if you don't do that with charity, if you don't help those along the way with us, if you don't really bring those that are close to us toward, not try to convince anybody, but trying to show what Spiritism has done to really transform the inner self of every one of us. Truly hope that this has been beneficial. And as we celebrate Allan Kardec's birthday on Monday, this becomes our small inspiration. Thank you so much, Leo, Daniel, Yasko, and everybody else for your questions and the invitation. And may really God be with us at all times.
Thank you, Flavio. And we will continue then with our second part of our meeting as we say our final prayer and we invite everyone for our spiritual passes.